The 20th century has seen appearing to threaten all of mankind two great totalitarian systems. That of Nazi Germany, connected of course with Adolf Hitler, and the totalitarian system of communism, which was set up in Russia by Lenin in 1917. The Nazi system lasted only for 12 years, though with a gigantic effort that had been required from the whole world, it was overthrown in 1945. Communism, however, remained in power in Russia and the area that they renamed the Soviet Union for 74 years, from 1917 until August of this year. So communism proved to have a much more staying power than Nazism, and was just as evil an ideology, just as evil a political system, with just as many victims, actually more. The rate of killing and of suffering was about the same for the two systems, but in Russia it lasted much longer. As we rejoice, and we should rejoice, over the fall of communism in Russia following the failure of the communist coup in August, we should need to look back and see how such a system could have gained control of the world's geographically largest nation. How did communism come to Russia, and why was it permitted to remain there for so long until the great changes of the last few years? Historically speaking, the principal reason that communism was able to take over in Russia was the First World War. The First World War was an unnecessary conflict. It should never have started. It should have been stopped as soon as possible after it was started, instead of going on for 4 terrible years of fruitless killing of soldiers in the trenches. This war drained the strength, not only the physical and economic strength, but the moral strength of the countries involved. People lost confidence in governments, in a way of life and of society that could lead them into such a pointless disaster as World War I was. It weakened all of the countries involved, and most of all Russia, which had a very autocratic government with one man, the Tsar, in charge. And that man, at the time of World War I, and Tsar Nicholas II, was a very weak man, a man under great psychological pressures because of problems with his family. He was really unfit to govern. Because of the strain, the tremendous strain of World War II on the country, World War I on the country, because of that strain, Nicholas was broken by it, the country was broken by it, law and order began to break down, troops were deserting by the hundreds of thousands, morale had collapsed, and it created a chaotic, confused situation where a small, disciplined minority could take over. And that is what the Communist Party provided under its extraordinary leader, Lenin. One of the most evil men in history and one of the most capable. A genius, an evil genius, but a genius. A man who had a tremendous ability to organize, to lead, to take advantage of an opportunity, and to strike for his maximum objectives. Now, Lenin did not even call himself a communist until April of 1917. He was, of course, a Marxist. Marx had originally called himself a communist, but later on he watered that name down to something that sounded a good deal better, a social democrat. And although he remained, of course, a revolutionary in his goals and in his methods. Lenin came into Marx's party, which was called the Social Democratic Party, and became the leader of a faction of it which he called the Bolsheviks, because at one particular conference they had attained a tiny majority, 27 to 23, and so he called himself the leader of the majority party. But he did not use the name communist for his movement until he came to Russia in April of 1917. By then, the Tsar had fallen, and a provisional government had been set up under a man named Kerensky. This happened in March. Lenin wasn't even in Russia at this time. He was in Switzerland. In order to get to Russia, he had to make a deal with the German government to cross their territory. They let him go because they hoped that he would make a revolution, and Russia was fighting against Germany in World War I. They wanted Russia out of the war. So that's why they let him go. Lenin arrived in Russia in April, immediately proclaimed that he and his party would go for total power. No power sharing, no coalitions, total power, and that became his slogan. He didn't say all power to the communists, he said all power to the Soviets. Soviets were sort of impromptu, ad hoc workers and soldiers councils that had been set up to represent the confused and angry workers and soldiers. They had no real leadership, no real principles of order. There was ideal vehicle for the communists to use to take power. So Lenin started the slogan, all power to the Soviets, and he said, we must now call ourselves the Communist Party, no longer attempting to conciliate, to compromise with anybody. We go for total power. This is what we want, and we want the full abolition of property and the complete change in human nature that communism involves. Of course, you can't change human nature. This can't be done. But Lenin was insisting that he could. So he proclaims the party the Communist Party, and they begin moving toward the full seizure of power in the course of the year 1917.